Hi guys, it's Frankie from Frankie Tech. Good to see you guys again, and I'm here with my comparison between the Mi 10 Pro global version and the Mi 10 Pro China ROM version. Now this weekend it's been interesting. Ever since I posted my Mi 10 Pro review for the global version, there's been quite a bit of backlash about the price that Xiaomi has listed this Mi 10 Pro at 999 euros. It is significantly higher than the price that the China ROM version is coming in. And this phone, while amazing, has caused a lot of concern from you guys on Twitter and on the interwebs, basically saying that the global version, or at least the European version, is just way too expensive. What is going on here when you can get a China ROM version for so much less? Mi 10 Pro China version came in at 4,999 yuan, or 715 US dollars. Those prices will vary, but here are the price listings. And so for you guys, when you see these two phones, they are practically identical in terms of hardware. And obviously the major difference here is global ROM versus China ROM. So you're talking deep Google integration on this phone versus none on this phone. And now you're also talking about certain things like this App Vault, Mi AI that are going to be included here, and a bunch of other China-based applications that you just will not get on this Mi 10 Pro. Now I've actually removed most of the bloat from this China ROM version of the phone, but it initially ships with like 18 different apps that are all in Chinese. I immediately removed those, and as a global user, I basically try to set this up as close to the eventual global version of the phone as I can. Now, one positive about the Mi 10 Pro China version is that it does come with L1 included out of the box for HD Netflix. That's a first. I've never seen that happen on a China ROM version of the phone. And while there are some ads and other aspects that are quite annoying, there are certain things that the China ROM does have that the global doesn't, for example. But here's the big difference, guys, at least for you in Europe who speak different languages. Why have I been pushing this global version so much? It's because of language support. English is the only language that is going to run on this China ROM version of the phone. Every other language is an Asian language. If you speak French, si hablas español, if you speak Spanish, if you speak si parli italiano, like basically you cannot use this phone if you're going to want to switch to a different language for your daily use. You'll be stuck with English. That may be okay for most of you, but for a lot of you in other countries, it won't. But like I mentioned before, guys, the hardware of these devices is identical, and whichever color you pick, you're going to end up basically with the same two color options for this Mi 10 Pro, whether it be the global or the China ROM version. And as you can see here, the China ROM version I've been using is actually the 12 GB of RAM, 256 gigs of storage version. That's going to be even more expensive than the base model, which is this 8256 GB version that's coming in at that 1,000 euro price point. And so let's face it, guys, these phones are practically identical in terms of hardware. It's the global ROM versus China ROM debate that I think has been raging this weekend, and I want to chime in on it. I personally still think for my needs, the global version is the better choice, but I can understand, given that huge price difference between the European and the China model, that a lot of you guys are now considering, hey, why don't I just pick up the China ROM version? It's the version at the price point that I want. And you can very much still do that. In fact, most of the third-party vendors that I've talked about, they are all selling the China ROM version. And so I guess in that case, the China version of the phone is becoming far more appealing to a lot of you. And this may actually push a lot of people to purchase the China ROM version. Now, I did drop a tweet saying, look, the hardware of this phone is far more in line now with the prices that we've seen from phones from other companies like Apple, like Samsung, like Huawei, like Oppo. The Find X2 comes in at well over 1,000 euros. That phone has very similar specs. I can see what Xiaomi's doing here, but at the same time, it is a risky strategy, especially because they are really well known as the company that gives you the best price to performance ratio in terms of the hardware that you get. And let's face it, this phone does have flagship hardware at a much lower price, so I can understand the concern. But I think for me, the conclusion is going to come when this phone releases releases in Hong Kong. Now, most of the time, the Hong Kong versions of phones are essentially the global versions, and they generally cost a little bit, maybe slightly more than the China ROM versions, but because China ROM versions are so readily available here, they never have costed 50% more than the China ROM version. I don't know if it's something to do with supply chain or with the challenges of the current situation that the price on this is so high, or maybe it's a chance for Xiaomi to really start playing right next to Samsung, Apple, and these other smartphones as a flagship phone of choice, and it's not skimping on materials at all, guys. This is a full flagship phone of 2020, but I do think that transition is a challenge for a number of you guys out there. And now I've heard talk of let's buy the China ROM version and flash the global ROM. Now, guys, I typically am not going to recommend doing that kind of thing. I'm not really of the expertise to do that. If you want to go and search online for ways to possibly do that, by all means, but at the same time, it's pretty easy to get Google Apps installed on the China ROM version of the phone. That's pretty much how I live my life, using China ROM phones, but installing Google on my own. That is how I test most of the phones on my channel. And so for a lot of you guys really kind of dead set on the global versions of phones, this may become the new normal if we still want to check out these great Xiaomi flagships, but for a lower price. But it does come at a sacrifice of language support, deep Google integration. So I will really wait to see what happens to the Hong Kong pricing here, and then I'll make my determination whether I pick up a Hong Kong version of the phone or if I stick with the China ROM version. We shall see. But hit me up in the comments. Has the pricing of the new Xiaomi Mi 10 and Mi 10 Pro series in Europe given you a bit of a pause? Are you now considering possibly the China ROM versions, or are you dead set still getting the global version with global Google support, language support, and the works? And that's it for this video. If you liked it, give me that thumbs up. And if you love the content of Frankie Tech, subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon for future updates. And stay tuned, guys, because we have another phone joining this conversation soon. The Redmi K30 Pro is on the way, because that phone is going to make a lot of you guys reconsider, what do I value in my flagship Xiaomi phone in 2020? So that's it, and this is where I leave you by saying, this is Frankie Tech signing off. Have a good one.